Now we're seeing business teams show up and say, hey, I vibe coded this new application. I'd like to get it into production.
Yeah.
And the tech team, they're going nuts because they're like, wait a second. This got to integrate with our enterprise architecture, our data layer. It's got to be secure. There's a whole lot we got to do to get industrialized and into production.
Welcome to the Talking AI podcast, where we talk AI with both experts in the field and early adopters. I'm your host, Matt Page, and we're here to demystify AI for you so you can get some value from it. Let's talk some AI. In the past few months, we've watched Anthropic almost single-handedly cause many market panics across multiple sectors. They've put out security scanning and code review capabilities, and cybersecurity stocks tanked. They showed how Claude Code can do COBOL modernization work, and IBM dropped 13%. And with each new feature release, they're driving some to call it a SaaS-pocalypse. And the market's trying to figure out what AI is about to replace next. But what actually is happening inside the companies doing the work, and that's what this episode's about. I'm sitting down with Dan Priest, the Chief AI Officer at PwC. He oversees their massive AI investment, works with the vast majority of Fortune 500, and has a front row seat to what's actually happening behind the headlines. And the reality sometimes looks very different from the narrative. And we're getting into what companies are actually doing to get ROI, where they're wasting money, why most organizations are measuring the wrong things, and what leaders are pulling ahead and what are they doing. This is your AI reality check. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation because we're getting beneath all the crazy headlines that are going on. And like I said in the intro, in the last few months, we've watched this Anthropic almost single-handedly cause these mini market panics across all kinds of sectors. And it seems like each new feature they put out, it causes shockwaves through the markets. But what's actually going on here? Is the market correctly pricing in this disruption, or are we watching an overreaction play out, or is it something in the middle? What's your take on what we're witnessing?
Yes, and probably yes. It's
All of the above.
it's the disruption we're seeing in the SaaS market is in some ways rational, right? It's that the investors are looking out and say, hey, we've got to price future earnings. And the clarity on those future earnings around SaaS companies has gotten a little less clear because of these announcements you just referenced.
Mhm.
And so classic, investor logic, what's the discount rate? What's the appropriate discount rate to reflect certainty or uncertainty, the level of risk they're signing up for around those earnings? And the discount rates have gone up, so the valuations have come down. And I would just sort of summarize by saying there is still hype out there that factors in. There's a lot of reality, though, a lot of reality to build with, and just a ton of confusion.
Mhm.
And so investors are trying to make sense of this complicated world. Management teams are too. And we're starting to see patterns emerge where leaders are doing certain things around business strategy that factor in AI. And they're starting to develop approaches to rebuilding critical capabilities to compete and win with AI. And they're getting ahead. And then others are trying to make sense of all those market gyrations that we're seeing. And there's a little paralysis around how do I get started? Where do I get started? What should the returns be? How much should I invest? And they're just trying to make sense of that. And some are doing a better job than others.
Yeah, and this is not a finance podcast by any means, so you're still in the right place if you're here for the AI. But you hit such a core point because when people are pricing equities and how the market's pricing them, it's based on expectation of future cash flows. And that uncertainty is driving a lot of this change because it used to be very predictable and now it's just not as
Right.
much. And the interesting thing is too, executive teams are seeing all of this. So they're getting pressured by the board by what are we doing in AI because it's causing all of this panic and hype and demand and all of that.
Quick break in the pod. Our State of AI 2026 report just dropped, and it breaks down what actually is changing in AI, what's hype, and what leaders need to be paying attention to this year. You can grab it right now on our show notes or at hatchworks.com.
But I'm curious from your perspective, what are you seeing in the organizations? Are you seeing, CISOs at Fortune 500 companies actually ripping out their security tools and hey, we got we got Claude in here now to do all of our security, or is it a bit more nuanced than that? It's like the actual real
it's more
world.
nuanced.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the security front, they've actually done a pretty good job. Anybody who's building with these capabilities, one of the first hurdles they had to cross was, what is the appropriate security architecture for AI? And you don't want your data assets leaking into these large language models. You don't want inappropriate use of customer data that compromises the integrity of those data. And so, to be able to build industrial strength solutions, we had to solve those security problems very early on. And I think we're in pretty good shape. Not universally, you can see some missteps in the market happen. But for the most part, I would say the CISOs have figured this thing out. And then, to your point, yeah, I've spent a lot of time with board members. I've spent a lot of time with C-suites. 2 years ago, the most popular client conversation I was having was with chief technology officers, chief information officers, chief data officers. That has fundamentally changed. And now these days, I spend the majority of my time with CEOs and their leadership teams.
Yeah.
And it sort of signals the shift that's happened, that the technology is good, and we can talk more about that because it's really good. It's not good at everything, and the leaders are figuring out, where is it industrial strength and where is it still maturing, and there's some flat spots still. But CEOs are also, to the point about the pressure they're getting from boards and the investor community. They're saying, figure it out. We should see a demonstrable investment being made in AI. We want to move beyond experimentation. It's not that the age of experimentation is done. Like, we live in a digital world that has to digitize a whole lot more. And these code generators are the best path towards doing that. So it's certainly about the tech, but it's much more about the business discussions on what's going on in my industry, how much are my peers investing, where are they getting a return on that investment, and then they start to look inward. They say, okay, irrespective of what's happening in the industry, in this age of AI, the number one success factor is human talent. Like, where do I have great engineering talent that I can combine with deep domain expertise, that I could combine with really good change leaders that I'm going to oversee as a leadership team, not in a delegated model where I say, hey, tech team, go figure it out. But instead, where can I lean in and create certainty around the results I'm investing in? That's what's happening right now. And the market gyrations are forcing a more serious conversation at the management level about, what do I do with AI and how do I secure my future? And it's fascinating to see, because the advice I give to leadership teams is, if you leave that space unaddressed, meaning if you don't have an affirmative strategy that contemplates AI, your board and investors will start to worry. And so the leaders, they're going through a process of saying, okay, where do I need to be a leader? Where can I tolerate a lag? And where might I exit certain products and services or certain parts of my business, because the gap is growing so quickly? It's a minor part of my business, and I'm not willing to invest to do what it takes to become a leader in that area. So this lead lag exit analysis creates the byproduct is a strategy that they can go and talk to investors about. They can assure board members that they've got a plan.
Yeah. You just gave me so many rabbit holes I want to go down there, but it's such an important point up front, because I do agree. Early on, this was like, oh, this is technology, IT, CTO, engineering. You got this. But we've seen that shift too. It very much is transitioning into the business function. I think in large part, a lot of leaders are realizing the potential because they're starting to use these tools, but it's nuanced in terms of how you integrate it into the business. And there's a great AI leader, his name's escaping me right now, but he talks about this is more change management than it is technology. And he gives the analogy of, I'm not going to cure heart disease by putting a treadmill in every home in America, right? It's about changing the habit. And that's the hard part there. And so let me ask you this. I think one interesting thing I've noticed is a lot of this gets down to the tasks and the processes within an organization, right? A group of tasks effectively make up a job function. And a lot of people I've noticed immediately go to, okay, let's automate these tasks. But a lot of times I feel like you got to step back and say, should this process even still work this way or exist now that we have this new tool in our tool belt that is this probabilistic system that can do all of these great things? So it's almost a bit of process reinvention is the first step, which in many ways is just kind of mind-blowing, I think, for a lot of leaders, because that's completely reorienting how you work.
Yeah. So to your first point, I have observed that there's an 80-20 rule in this world of AI. And the 80-20 rule is this: 80% of this is about business transformation. 20% is about the tech.
Yeah.
And so business transformation is about where can I incrementally improve a process to get benefit? Where do I fully reimagine a function or an impact zone that I care about? How do I get people to adopt it? So innovation is far outstripping adoption right now.
Yeah.
And so like figuring out your people strategy to drive adoption, figuring out the new partnerships that are required to create value for the enterprise, figuring out how the operating model and maybe even the business model, like how do you compete and win and make money in the market? All of those things are up for discussion. That's all business. I haven't talked about tech yet, right? Tech is the 20%, which is, okay, I've got a dirty data estate. It's fractured. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to get value from. I've got a complicated application architecture. Tech is really important. And I've got this new layer, this new agentic layer. What do I do with that? Tech is really important, but it is 20%, roughly, of the equation. So much more about the business transformation. That's why ROI has been a bit elusive. It's like the most common mistake I see is companies flip those. They make the conversation 80% about the tech and 20% about the business transformation. And to your question about reimagination, listen, if I do that lead lag exit analysis and I say, I want to be a leader in a certain area, customer care, sales effectiveness, growth-oriented initiatives, that's a reimagination. Like you should not be incremental there. And that is really hard for companies to do right now because for the last couple decades, maybe longer, we've been not investing in innovation cultures that lead towards that reimagination. We've been investing in standards cultures, meaning I'm going to standardize this process, everybody adopt it, get more efficient, drop those dollars to the bottom line and do it again and again and again.
Yep.
Now it's reimagine it all. And they're like, okay, that sounds great. I just don't have the skills to do it. So it is an enormous leadership challenge facing most companies right now.
Yeah. It's so funny how it just gets back to this, the innovator's dilemma in a sense. And you have these incumbent organizations and a lot of them do struggle with it, but it's not like some new thing. AI and generative AI is new, but the concept of the innovator's dilemma is still very, reoccurring in a sense. And, you have these startups and newer organizations and they don't have all the baggage and the history. And they also have natural constraints where they kind of have to work in this new way. So they're leading with that. And you mentioned, I love the analogy you just gave in terms of a lot of organizations were oriented around optimization and standards and all of those things, which is what they should have been doing. But now you've hit this major inflection point, this transformation. The people side of it that you touched on, I think is just so critical. And it's extremely elusive in terms of, okay, well, how do you actually drive adoption in the organization with all of your people? I've seen a lot of different approaches to it. I'm curious, like, what have you seen work or be successful? And I'm sure there's multiple approaches and angles you can do to start to enable your team while also giving them direction. There's almost the top down and the bottoms up. Like,
Oh
what's
yeah.
your thoughts on tackling that piece of it?
It's exactly what you just said. It's top down and bottom up. So what we're seeing the leaders do is two-track transformations. And track one is that reimagine track that you referenced earlier. Track one is I've picked my spots. I know where I want to lead. I know what the shifting table stakes look like. I have to be successful in these areas. And track one gets a lot more management attention, a lot more investment, your best engineering talent, your deepest domain experts, your best change leaders. Right? Track one is I'm going to make this thing successful because the future of my business depends on it. Track two is where everybody started, frankly, which is I don't know exactly what to do with these tools. So I'm going to give it to the tech team and I'm going to give it to the citizenry, the corporate citizenry, and ask them, go figure this out, right? Tell me where there's some good opportunities to apply AI. And that track is important still, right? Because you want people to get comfortable with the tools. You want people to start incorporating them into their ways of working. It just doesn't produce the big transformational outcomes that management teams care most about. And you might be pleasantly surprised with some bright spots that emerge in that track too, like some pockets of innovation that flow. But that's not where we're seeing the outsized impact. We're seeing it top down, much more strategy driven, much more leadership led, much more intentional. And that pivot has made a big difference. And just being able to organize your thinking around, I've got both tracks activated. I'm managing them in very different ways to get the right results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like this, you almost have to give permission plus provide the direction, I've noticed, because a lot of folks, especially early on, they were very restrictive in terms of the use of AI, which logically that makes sense. But what I see on the ground is a lot of people are just scared to use the tools in a sense. So they're
Yeah.
not adopting them. So I think that's one interesting piece about it. But how do you think about that? Because literally, I can go a week and there's 5 new amazing tools that have come out. OpenAI's done this, Anthropic's done that. How do you think about, more specifically, what tools you're leveraging while also giving the autonomy to use the best tool for the specific job function or role? Any nuance or interesting approaches you've seen within larger organizations that may have
Yeah.
more, bureaucracy on that side?
Yeah. A couple of things. One is in the beginning, there were hard choices made about which tool you're going to use.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing companies choose not to choose too soon. So you see things like model gardens emerging, where depending on the architecture, you're getting the best of all of the tools or all of the models, and they're good at different things, right? And you want to have access to the best one. To your point, it's been really fascinating to watch the arms race around the tooling, the level of investment these model providers are making, the blistering pace at which they're improving, and the rankings just keep bouncing around, right? Like the leader today isn't for sure going to be the leader tomorrow. In fact, if we look at the last couple of years, you can bet that there will probably be a new tool, a new release that's whiz bang, and you're going to want to take advantage of. So, you know, making choices that don't lock you in, but give you the best, and then lining up those solution sets. So you like the stable of solutions is growing, and then lining up those solution sets against business problems you're trying to solve. Some solutions are super expensive, and you might be willing to make that investment because they're solving a $50 million problem. I'm going to spend 25 million because I'm solving a $50 million problem, right? That the benefits of that problem are significant, or solving it. That, you know, then there's this value curve where you start, you know, moving across the enterprise and like, well, not all problems produce $50 million in benefits. And so I need a solution that's fit for purpose, capability wise, and the economics have to make sense too. So I fill out that solution set. So I start mapping it to different business problems going after. That's one point on the tooling. The other is it just ain't about the tooling,
Yeah.
right? It's if you believe what I said before and you're AI pundit, it's mostly about the non-technical skills
Mhm.
that have to become AI powered.
Yeah.
And that is much more about how should this process run with AI? That's not a tooling question. That's a business question. Or, what should the configuration of my partnerships look like? Or how do I get people motivated to change and adopt? Right? These are all business skills that are now AI infused, and it's interesting to see companies, they continue to invest in the tooling layer, but give short shrift to all of the other non-technical AI skills that have to get developed to be successful and get an outcome. And so it's sort of get the right tooling in place, be careful about lock-in or creating solutions that limit your optionality. That's important. But then also recognize that, like every other big change in business history, there's so much more than just the tech. We keep learning that lesson over and over again. And you've got to invest in a modern apprenticeship model where people who use the tool reimagined the process, reimagined how work will get done, reimagined the people models, all those non-technical skills, pair them up with the rest of the teams that are taking on similar problems and help them be successful and create these feedback loops so that you can get the outcomes you want.
Yeah. No, I think to a certain extent, you almost just have to keep your blinders on, because once something great comes out with one tool, give it a week. The next one will probably have the same thing. But there's this interesting. I want to get your take on this. So I've noticed this in my own team. I covered strategy. We also have marketing as a function in my team. But I've noticed this like bleeding over and blending of roles in a sense, to where my analyst and strategist and writer and designer, they all can do more, and they're also bleeding into the functions of their counterparts. But it's almost been a good thing to where they can take a concept or whatever thing they're working on further than they used to be able to in the past. And there's this sense of, you can now do a whole lot more. And there's this narrative of, AI is going to take all of our jobs. And I think we're seeing some of that play out. You saw Block do layoffs. You're seeing all of this happen. But in a sense, though, and just curious your take on this, I feel like the bottleneck within a system's always going to shift to wherever the bottleneck is. There's always going to be a bottleneck that exists, right? And I'm not just doing the same amount of things. I'm doing way more, and my team is way more capable. I think the key thing is them being enabled and leveraging AI, but I don't sit around twiddling my thumbs going, man, we don't got anything to do. I feel so much busier now than I did a year ago. So I just feel like just humans in general are just naturally always going to focus on progression and abundance and all of these things. But this is a very meandering topic, not quite of a question, but I'm just curious your thoughts on that. And it gets, I think, to the nuance of the debate of, does AI take all our jobs, or does it create this new emergence of, human capabilities with AI and all of that?
I think AI promises to be disruptive. Jobs will change. That blurring that you're talking about is a very real thing. We see that a lot in the relationship between traditional IT teams and business stakeholders who are getting a lot more tech savvy. And that relationship and that interaction model is shifting quite a bit, right? In the past, the business would show up at the front doorstep of IT and say, "Hey, I got a requirement. Can you help me?"
Yeah.
And the IT team would be forced to say, "Well, get in line, right? We'll work you through the process."
Create your ticket.
Now businesses, right? Here's your ticket. Now we're seeing business teams show up and say, "Hey, I vibe coded this new application. I'd like to get it into production."
Yeah.
And the tech team, they're going nuts because they're like, "Wait a second. This got to integrate with our enterprise architecture, our data layer. It's got to be secure. There's a whole lot we got to do to get industrialized and into production." So,
But secretly they're thinking, man, this thing's pretty good at the same time too. But there's all of those repercussions you also mentioned. So like shadow IT is just a whole new realm today.
but it's to your underlying question, is that it will be disruptive. Jobs and roles will change, but we live in a digital world that is not terribly digitized right now. And you think about how much manual work we're still doing. I would love for my smartphone to be smarter. I'd love for my enterprise systems to be more intelligent and more capable and more touchless. I would love to have more of a boost working across that systems landscape. And that's what AI promises to do, to free us up from a lot of the scut work that we've been doing to contend with this really complicated enterprise architecture we've had to live with so long, and then find new value pools and go after them aggressively. And when we do that, you think about what drives the economy and economic growth. One of the biggest difference makers in economic growth is labor productivity.
Yeah.
And AI promises a huge boost to labor productivity on every level. The way tech teams build applications, the way business teams solve problems, the way we create value for customers, and every single front, we should see a big boom in productivity. And that should create a growth economy and new opportunities. And people, this is the hardest part. People have to be change ready. And so we could spend a whole podcast just on like the future of organizational design and getting people change ready and getting them moving up that value curve towards new roles. That is the highest potential play with AI and the hardest thing to do.
So I saw this random video. It's on Instagram or something the other day. It was this guy having a conversation with ChatGPT or Claude or something like that. And he was like, talking in context of tokens. And he was like, hey, how many equivalent tokens do you think I produce as a human in a year? And it's like, oh, you do so many great things, and just being completely sycophantic. And it's like probably about 5 million tokens. Like it's amazing. And he goes, wait a second, 5 million tokens. How quickly does AI produce that same 5 million? And what does that cost? And it's like, oh, about a minute or two. And it's like, a couple bucks or something like that. And this person's having this like realization and epiphany moment. But the nuance is, though, that human that's learning how to leverage these tools is just completely expanding their capability set. And I think that's such a critical thing. And where I tell most people, it's okay to be kind of scared and resistant to it, but you got to start leveraging these tools. Because it is about expanding what you're capable of doing, and it just enables you to not only do a lot more, but be a lot more attractive in the labor market, to the point you were just mentioning there.
Yeah. And these models are not above self-promotion either, right? So
exactly.
They right? They will do some things really well, and they're still struggling with other things. I will tell you, the human value proposition today, tomorrow, next year, in 5 years, it is extremely strong. It's just different,
100%.
and you kind of have to know that what I talk to clients a lot about is think about your accountability model.
Mhm.
And so our business, we have, licensed CPAs, we have people who have certifications, we have people who are trained extensively to do certain things. And therein lies a layer of accountability that's super important. Like nobody's going to go to that AI agent and say, hey, you really messed that thing up. We're going to have a talk with you, right? It's going to show up in your performance review. Or if you really messed it up, like we're going to fire. Nobody's going to have the termination conversation with an agent.
Yeah.
The accountability still rests with the human for all those reasons I just mentioned. And that's a natural governor on how fast or how far all of this goes. And so you want to create control points. You want the human feeling accountable, not turning over all the thinking to the AI agents, having their head in the game around the outcomes, having the head in the game around quality, and reliability and security. All of those things are incredibly important. And we're seeing some really good examples of companies operating that way and doing some neat things. Like for instance, we just published a case study around Lucid Motors, and it was the CFO who sponsored that. And forecasting,
Mm.
forecasting has been a problem for most companies for a very, very
Yeah.
long time. And interestingly, if you know anything about forecasting, planning and forecasting, the more humans touch a forecast, typically the less accurate
Yeah.
it becomes.
Yeah.
And so you want an intelligent, touchless forecast as much as possible. So they went and using agentic solutions, they took their forecast down from weeks to minutes.
Wow.
And so that's important, right? Those proof ones, we've got a series of them out there right now. That's important to see those types of results. Now, that's not saying management has checked out, even if it's touchless, right? Management still owns that forecast, but the value proposition has evolved, right? Now it's saying, okay, what do I do with this more intelligent forecast that's nearly real time? And that you can predict demand better. You can tune production runs more accurately so it meets market demand in a more tailored way. So that's a different skill, though.
And that's like the perfect example of what I was just rambling about earlier. What does that enable when the bottleneck is not the forecasting in this scenario, which was weeks, now it's minutes? It shifts somewhere else. And that's where I think you see this interesting progression throughout an organization when this starts to, it's almost contagious in a sense. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, how do you think about agent design? Like agents are the hot topic right now. You have OpenClaw and all of these things going on. How do you think about agent design? How
Yeah.
do you think about agents in general? Is it more agents are better? Is it less? Like just what's your thoughts on how to think about an agentic approach to something? Because this is so new for organizations.
Yeah. So going back to that 2-track transformation, in track 2, where you're trying to empower the citizenry, okay, the agent count's going to go up by a lot, and that's good, right? You want people to have their agents that help them do their work to achieve those benefits we just talked about. In track 1, so in a finance function, just sticking with the finance function, for instance, you might have 10 to 15 agents doing AR, AP, transaction processing, doing reporting, helping with the close, assisting with the forecast. But it's not 100, it's not 1,000, right? It's much more about the quality and the capability of those agents. And so you want, around those authoritative parts of your business that have to be right and reliable and high quality. It's much more about, one, it's not just agents. It's going to be a hybrid architecture. You're going to have machine learning.
Yeah.
You might even have RPA still involved, right? You're going to have a hybrid architecture that produces reliable quality results. And the volume is going to come from the users adopting those authoritative agents. And there'll be a feedback loop. The more users using that small subset of agents, the better those agents should get. That's one. Two, I also see the agent layer of the architecture evolving from, I'm going to put a bunch of agents into production, and now I've got a management channel. And that's not a less complicated architecture. That's a more complicated architecture. And so these agents, I think, will also start to mature into agentic applications. Those 10 to 15 agents will start to look and feel a little bit more like an application layer. It's just that it's comprised of agents who are highly expert and authoritative and producing quality outcomes. That the agent space is just evolving so quickly, but they're the best source of AI value today. So they're worth investing in. And the last thing I'll say is the way you manage them makes a big difference, right? Like knowing what I'm measuring. If I'm going to measure agent counts, I might be giving up some quality, right? If I'm measuring agent outcomes, I'm probably optimizing for quality and certainty. But I want to know where those agents are deployed. I want them registered. I almost treat them like a third-party contractor, right? Where I've brought them in, I've given them permission to certain data sets, I manage their performance, I've scoped their tasking very deliberately, so like I minimize the risk of drift. And those permissions expire over time, and I have to refresh them and manage them based on the outcomes and their performance, right? It's very much like a new member of the team that looks a lot like a third party.
Yeah, and I want to pause there. Like anybody that's just kind of passively listening, that's such an important point. This is not like a calculator where if you type in 4 + 4 and it gives you 10, you throw it away because it's broken, right? Is so different because these are probabilistic systems and they do need that feedback loop. And to your point, it's like having a new hire, right? You don't just say, hey, go do the thing and expect perfect results. You got to train them. You give them tasks to start on. They start to master that. And then you expand from there. But that feedback loop is the most critical thing. And that can come from humans. That can come from other agents. There's multiple mechanisms there. But that's such a critical point that I think people need to understand as they're progressing into this arena. When you think about what to tackle first,
Just on that point too, before you move on, but just because it is such an important point, I started by saying there's a lot of confusion out there still, and still some hype. Some of the hype is around what these agents are good at, and they are probabilistic. They are not good at everything, although they're getting better every single day. But you can see like. Model quality is improving, but it's still not perfect. I'm talking across model. I'm not picking on any one, but model quality is improving. They're really good at qualitative tasks, because of how they were trained originally, right? They were trained on more qualitative data. The way these models tokenize, they're a little less good at the intensely quantitative tasks. That's why I was saying, think about machine learning as a part of your solution set, because machine learning is much more deterministic. And so you kind of have to know what you're building with, and you're building with a maturing capability, not a fully matured capability, but a maturing capability. Even task length, the ability for these models and agents to concentrate for a period of time on a particular task, there are limits to that. And so it's important to know, and they're measuring that now. It's important to know, like, and you see anecdotes of, hey, I kind of like the offshore model. I gave my agent a task, and I went to bed, and I was expecting this great outcome when I woke up the next morning, but overnight it had drifted, right? And
Yeah.
the quality was a problem. It's because of task length,
Yeah.
right? And like it's the ability for that agent to concentrate for a sustained period of time is rapidly maturing. They suspect by 2027, 2028 timeframe, it'll be up to like a 40-hour work week. But right now it's a little over 2 hours. So you just have to know what you're building with and build and design accordingly.
Yeah. Or you give it the wrong API keys and you wake up to a massive bill for something it decided to
Yeah.
do and it optimized for incorrect. I always go back to the Silicon Valley TV show where it just ordered hundreds of pounds of meat because it was more efficient and it was optimizing for, some price efficiency or something. But it technically got to the outcome. But so there's this interesting thing too, and I think access to the tools can help with the deterministic things. But systems of record and the SaaS-pocalypse where we started it, let's bring it back full circle here. Do those become less important, more important? Because these agents, they need access to this, quality data, which in large part resides in these massive systems of record. And then, you see stories of people, I vibe coded a CRM, but should I be vibe coding a CRM? Does that actually differentiating my business in any way? So what's your take on system of record? And then, what should you be building with AI in a sense?
So you can imagine the number of conversations we're having on this exact topic.
Yeah.
I just did another one this morning. We're working with different clients to figure out what is the future of ERP and SaaS. And, the future promises to be different.
Yeah.
Nobody can
That's the
say with
best
absolute certainty.
quote I've ever heard. The future promises to be different. I'm going to use that from now on.
Well, and these application vendors know it too, right? They're facing an existential threat. But to your question, so I said before, we're living in a digital world that has to digitize a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And am I going to go after ERP right now? Or do I go after like a very target rich environment that is going to be differentiating and help my business grow and create a great customer experience? I believe, this is one person's opinion, I believe the ERP value proposition remains strong, but the ERP footprint is certainly under pressure, right? And maybe the footprint contracts or the focus of the ERP gets more focus. But even those model providers or the application vendors, they know that. And so they're going to build out their agentic layer, right? And they're going to give you options to use their out of the box agents, just like some companies are building themselves. And so you have to be, so one, I don't think ERP is going away.
Yeah.
You want a clean core. You want to be in the boat with your industry peers who are constantly enhancing those ERPs, making sure they're compliant. There's a lot of value left there, but you do have this growing agentic layer that will start to encroach a little bit.
Yeah.
And so you have to make choices about what scope am I buying from the ERP vendor, the SaaS provider, am I building bespoke, because I think it will make a difference to my business. And what parts of this new agentic layer that those SaaS providers are building out do I want to take advantage of?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's opening up a host of really interesting conversations. But in the foreseeable future, I would not be going after replicating through vibe coding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I vibe coded Microsoft Paint this morning for no reason, just because I could vibe code it in But there's no
Yeah.
there's no value in that. It was just fun. But it's another random rambling, and then we're gonna wrap this up. And I'm curious if this triggers any other thoughts from you. But and this is just personal experience. Like I'm sitting here, every tool I have is coming out with their new agent or agentic thing, and I'm sure they're great. It's like there's almost this overload in my mind of, oh man, I got to figure out how to work with this one and that one. But then on the other side, you have the frontier players, and they're getting into these connectors and skills and things like that, to where the model just knows how to go use the thing. And it's two
Yeah.
different strategic approaches that are emerging. And, one thing strategically, you could think, okay, I'm going to go build my agent for my system. But it's almost like, should you almost be just making your product easier for agents to use, I think, is the other angle of it. And, your agents being able to interact with other agentic tools is the other side. But curious your thoughts on like that strategic decision, because boardrooms want to see that new AI tool and feature that you have, but is that always like the best thing to do strategically?
No, I mean, the answer is going to be no. It is sometimes, but that's why we're spending a lot of time at the management level
Mhm.
figuring out what is your strategy. And it's definitely a strategy discussion. And you do want to architect your agent layer in a way that it avoids lock-in, right? It takes advantage of these rapidly improving, rapidly emerging new capabilities.
Mhm.
And that collaboration, that agent collaboration that you're talking about, again, it ain't simpler, right? It's more complicated. And you're going to want to have architectures and controls and, decision frameworks that allow you to decide, I'm building this, I'm going to, buy that, I'm going to rent the other.
Mhm.
And then it all has to operationalize. By the way, going back to the ERP and SaaS providers, a lot of teams are focused on the cost to achieve, but
Mm.
all of the value happens once it goes into production. And then you're in a continuous improvement model where you say, okay, this new thing's entering, I've got to enhance the other. This new reg just came out, I've got to enhance that. Like you have to maintain it in a run environment in a way that you haven't before.
Yeah.
And all of that needs to be figured out. We're seeing the last thing I'll say is we're seeing benchmarks start to emerge. So 2 years ago, the data was all over the place. Everybody's investing different levels in different things. And now we're starting to see benchmarks emerge around the sector by sector. They're very, sector
Yeah.
specific, but we're seeing investments into these agentic architectures, but they're not unlimited. And I'm not talking about for the foundation builders, like the big tech companies. I'm talking about for the typical legacy business that's trying to become AI powered. Those budgets are not unlimited.
Yeah.
And so you have to make your choices strategically and place your bets. And the only way you can do that is one, have a view of your business strategy, know where AI is going to make a difference, know where it's going to be growth oriented and, growing revenues, know where you've got to get more efficient. You're just simply chasing table stakes, and then know how to manage it all, right? Like this environment we're creating is a lot more complicated. And the only reason you invest in more complicated architectures, tech and business, is if you think there's a payback, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing hard evidence that the juice is worth the squeeze if you pick smartly.
Mm. Yeah, such a great spot to finish up there. Such great insight into how enterprises are thinking about AI, tackling AI, and this nuanced progression that's happening over time. But Dan, thanks for talking a little bit of AI. Where can people find you? Where can they learn more about all the cool stuff that PwC is doing in the AI front?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I enjoyed the conversation a lot. Check us out on PwC.com. A lot of these case studies are published there. Our viewpoints around what we're learning in the market are on PwC.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and try to do a pretty good job of sharing what I'm seeing in the market. So yeah, look forward to more conversations.
Awesome, Dan. Well, thank you for talking a bit of AI.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for listening to the Talking AI podcast. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave us a review. We love those. For more info on Talking AI, visit talkingaipodcast.com. Quick break in the pod. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you've been thinking about how to actually use AI inside your business. And that's exactly why we built the AI Opportunity Finder. It's a free tool that helps you uncover high impact, tailored AI use cases based on your business, your goals, your pain points, and your industry. No fluff, no generic use cases, just real ideas that fit your business, and they're ranked by ROI potential. It takes about 3 minutes to run, and it's like having your own personal AI strategist for free. If you want to try it for free, check out the link in the show notes or go to hatchworks.com/AI-opportunity-finder.